Hello, I'm Richard Murphy, and I want to talk about something that I've been asked to talk about, which is the impact of the property market on our economy. Now, property has been the middle class obsession of England in particular for the last, 30 or 40 years, frankly, as long as I can really remember. The obsession is, of course, not about having a place to live, although that's important. That's shared by everyone. The obsession is with the value of property and its increase, which is why this appears to be important to the economy as a whole, and why we also see this figure reported so frequently in the press. But is it as important as people think it is? Well, from a personal, that is literally the householder's own perspective, yes, it is important, because owning a property that is going up in price makes them feel good. And in that sense, they then believe that they can spend more money, and that increases business confidence, increases confidence in the economy, increases spending, and so on. It also means that more people move, and when more people move, there is again more spending. But these are peripheral issues. What happens at a macro level is much more significant, because two things really happen as a result of the property market. One is that vast amounts of bank lending have gone simply into lending to fuel property price increases. It's generally thought by most people that banks exist to lend money to business. That's simply not true. Banks exist to lend money for buying houses in the UK. 85% of all bank lending is related to property ownership in this country. And that means that we fundamentally misallocate the resources of our banking system, because most houses that are bought in the UK are second-hand. It's not a concept that you actually hear referred to very often. You hear about second-hand cars, you hear about second-hand all sorts of things. But when people buy a house that is not new build, they don't say, I'm buying a second-hand house. They say, no, I'm buying a period cottage or an Edwardian terrace or whatever it might be. But in practice, they are buying a second-hand house. And whilst they might spend a bit renovating it, that only happens in the first year or two, by and large, of their ownership, after which they do very little to the property. And therefore, that money that is lent by banks to buy that property is virtually used to buy a dead asset. Something that has already been built, does not add value in the terms of adding to our gross domestic product, nor does it create employment, or at least very much, because nothing much is done to that property thereafter. And so that lending does not help in any shape or form increase the employment and productive capacity of our economy. So that's one problem that increasing house prices creates. And the other one is that it fuels inequality, because when I was relatively young, when I bought my first property, I could actually buy a flat in London on the basis of my salary as a newly qualified chartered accountant for 3 times my earnings. Now that is simply impossible now. Absolutely impossible. The flat in question, I looked it up recently just out of curiosity, is now worth nearly £500,000. And I can assure you that newly qualified chartered accountants in London are not earning something like £130,000 or more a year now, no, more than £150,000 a year. That sort of money that is required to create that same ratio, it simply doesn't happen. So what increasing property prices have done is create a barrier to entry for young people into the property market, which will exist forever. And the other consequence of that is that as people get older, and of course the baby boomer generation who have benefited so much from this increase in property value are getting older and will one day inevitably die, then they will be leaving the value of this property, unless we do something to redress this situation, to their offspring, who will then become multiple property owners and still deny that entry to many young people into the property market. Now that is a problem, because inequality crushes most people in society, including, by the way, the wealthiest, because those who have to pay rent forever never have the freedom to really spend as they choose. Their income is always going to be dominated by the need to find housing to pay rent, even in retirement. And that means that they cannot spend what is really required to keep the economy going as well. And since they tend to be the people with lowest income who have the highest marginal propensity to consume, which simply means that they spend all that they get by and large because they've got no choice, that means that they have the greatest capacity to increase growth and therefore employment in an economy, but are denied it by the way in which the property market works. So the fact that we fuel so much money from our banking system into property price increase for the benefit of a relatively small part now of society as a whole, because those who are really able to benefit are those who are older, who do not have mortgages and who can pass on property to their next generation, who will have inherited wealth as a consequence. That means that we are creating an embedded problem which has got to be addressed in this country if we're ever going to get any form of vibrant economy again. How do we do that? Well, at some time we're going to have to face the inevitable fact that tax will have to be charged on the houses that people have lived in. It may only be on death. It may have to replace capital gains tax. It may be a charge on the lifetime capital gain that people have made by owning property through their various homes throughout their lives. But whichever way we look at it, unless we begin to redress this imbalance, our economy is going to be unbalanced and some people are going to lose out very badly. And that means that the property market is not helping, as most who are obsessed by property prices think it is, but is actually hindering our economy. And this is an issue that needs to be addressed. I'm Richard Murphy. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to this video series on YouTube if you're interested. Also look for us on Facebook. I am on Twitter @RichardJMurphy. And at the same time, look at my blog, Tax Research UK, where you can find much more on these themes. And I'll see you again soon.